Hey, what's up, folks? How are you? I hope that everything's going well, and I hope that you're doing sensational. I again thank you for all the support you're giving me, and make sure you subscribe. Make sure that you, of course, little thumbs up. Make sure you click that. Make sure you start to also click the little bell. Make sure you do all that stuff so you every time something pops up in my head, I'm going to be able to put it on YouTube, as this is going to be the way for me to communicate more often with you. Do you remember a couple of years back when I was going and saying, hey, you know what? Football and politics have this relationship that's funny because you hear a lot of pundits here in the United States saying, oh, football, sport and politics never should go hand in hand. They always do. And they always go hand in hand in convenient ways. Do you remember back when I was talking about the World Cup qualifiers in 20 or for the 2018 World Cup and the pressure that Argentina had? Look, if you go back to the match against Ecuador for Argentina, there was so much speculation if Argentina did not qualify for the World Cup, the repercussions that there would be. There were still repercussions, okay? Mauricio Macri ends up not being reelected. His party ends up losing power. The Kirchneristas end up coming back into power. All of that. But a lot of it they were going to attribute to Leo Messi, to Argentina, so on and so forth. And how they performed in the World Cup, I may add. And a lot of that did have some maybe indirect repercussions, but there were repercussions nonetheless. Now, Argentina finds itself in another moment, in another crossroads, if you will, from an economic standpoint. Inflation is running rampant. People think the United States inflation is running rampant. Check out what's going on in Argentina. You're going to get a major reality check as to what inflation can truly be. Not to minimize what's going on here in the least, but over there it's kind of amplified. They pulled the lever and they yanked it out, kind of thing. The actual government, the Kirchner government, that party ends up having a major issues in terms of what can happen, what will happen. Basically, the president Alberto Fernandez is a lame duck. They bring in a new minister. They bring in a new economic minister to be able to rectify everything and make sure that everything is okay, or can be as close to okay as possible. I'll put it to you this way. I'm going to put it in a more humane aspect possible, okay? And I'll give you more of a human aspect because, you're going into politics. Kind of, because in order for you to understand what I'm talking about, you're going to have to find out what the average person goes through, okay? Let me use a round number, okay? You earn $10,000 a month. I wanted to make it as round a number as possible and as attractive a number as possible as well. January 2022, you come in and you earn $10,000 a month. Inflation hits. That $10,000, because of course now you have to make the equivalence of the dollar to the Argentine peso, and then at that time it's $10,000. Of course, we're talking hypothetically here. Go with me. As inflation hits, then the following year, that $10,000 a month ends up becoming $5,000, and then of course $4,000, and then $3,000, and then $2,000, so on and so forth, until that what was once $10,000 a month ends up being $1,000 a month, and maybe that's how it's been in Argentina over the past 2, 3, 4 years. Now, Argentina had a history of inflation, hyperinflation, even back in the 1980s. But that's when issues like sport would take over and kind of, take the focus away from the actual situation and have people go and enjoy. November, December has always been a very politically hot month in that country. Coincidentally, this year, the hottest, if you want to call it that, political month or months of the year you happen to have the World Cup. So now you start looking at all the political figures and everything that's going there in the back and forth that they have. And there's one thing that ends up emerging, ladies and gentlemen. Leo Messi. He's the one that many will be looking at, not to solve the problems. Again, let's be realistic. He's not going to solve inflation. Argentina wins the World Cup the next day, people still have to go to work, or 2 days later, 3 days later, when whatever the celebrations, or whatever they come back from vacation, they have to go back and work, and they have to go back and work in maybe even dire conditions and dire salaries, whatever you may say. But the pressure and the onus is on the Argentine national team to be able to perform well. I'm not saying win the World Cup, although it can be interpreted as that. And if you were to interpret it as such, it would be very, very plausible, very, very feasible. Why not? Go for it. Knock yourself out. It's a very, very probable situation that maybe that'll be the only way that this kind of is able to be brushed aside. Now, all this that I'm talking about, inflation and everything that's going on with the economic and socioeconomic situation in Argentina, ends up being something that is taken on the back burner for a few days, maybe for a few months, and they start being punch drunk and celebrating that Argentina won a World Cup for the first time since 1986. And Leo Messi can be finally sitting in the Olympus of world football, and he can finally be crowned as the greatest player in history, and then, of course, all the celebrations that incur because of that. Keep that in mind when you're watching this World Cup, because the economic situation that's going on in Argentina is not going to be fixed by next week, or it's not going to be fixed by 2 weeks from now, or a month or 2 months. Maybe it won't get fixed at all. There will be a bit of a reprieve. Keep in mind that, what was it? About a month and a half ago, the Argentine peso to the dollar, it was 240 to 1. So 240 Argentine pesos to 1 US dollar. It's been up to 329. So basically it's gone up over a third more. So it's gone up over 80 pesos in a span of about a month. And with that, you end up having, what costs, I'll use US dollars. What costs $5 today costs $7.50 tomorrow. What costs $4 today costs $6 tomorrow. And then what costs $6 tomorrow ends up costing $7.50 the day after that, and so on and so forth. Understand what's going on here in terms of how, and on top of that, your salaries aren't matching. And of course, the disparity ends up being this. Again, I don't want to go into it. I'm not an economics teacher. I'm not an economics expert. I'm not of course, I do stuff in terms of international relations and have studied in terms of history and diplomatic work. That ends up being something that I have some experience in. Not a whole lot, but I studied it, so I guess I could say, and of course with football, that ends up kind of intertwining to a certain extent. But you understand that now there is an additional pressure being placed on the Argentine national team to be able to be successful, and that will be something to look at. Now, is it a better situation than compared to 2018? Yeah, absolutely, because you actually have a semblance of a team. You also have Messi that's comfortable, Messi that's been able to sit there and be able to establish himself as the leader in a leadership situation where not the entire weight of the world is on his shoulders. That weight is being carried by many, and many are carrying the appropriate weight. Many are just kind of there and saying, well, Leo, take us to the promised land. Here they're saying, hey, Leo, we're going to help you get to the promised land. And that ends up being a very different set of circumstances compared to what was 2018 and the disaster that was. And, of course, the repercussions that were had from a political standpoint because of that. Now 2022 rolls around. Yeah, there's going to be a lot more pressure from that perspective. Keep in mind, again, I tell this to people so people understand. Argentina is a very particular country when it comes to football, because it's not only football commentators and football analysts that talk about football. It's also political analysts. It's also political experts. Argentina plays, and they're talking about what's going on in political shows. Boca plays, the repercussions of Boca doing well or not, or the repercussions of Boca having good economics or River having good economics, ends up being on political shows because there is a certain impact that River and Boca have in terms of the political spectrum in Argentina. As crazy as that sounds, that is the reality over there. So keep in mind that when November rolls around and the World Cup is being played, there's going to be an additional pressure put on the national team. Will they be able to assume it? Maybe this group could. Maybe this group could sit back and not be affected by that pressure. Although there is always pressure when you're playing for Argentina, just like you would if you played for Brazil. The obligation of competing, the obligation of contending, and also the obligation of being there and possibly winning a World Cup is always going to be ever present. So that's going to be very key, whether it has political ramifications or not. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when you're looking at the World Cup and the little bit of ingredients that will be added on in the coming days, in the coming weeks, and of course in the coming months. Guys, like I said, make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe, make sure that you also click on the little bell. Just anytime I say have some type of idea or something that I conjure up in my head that I want to express and share with you. I love this platform a lot better than the previous ones, and maybe I could be able to express and elaborate more on my ideas here than anywhere else. Again, thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Ciao.